All right, let's jump right in. Today, we're diving into part 5 of an absolutely fantastic 8-part tutorial titled IPv6 Troubleshooting for System Administrators and Technical Support. This was put together by Virtualization Options LLC, which is a Colorado-based tech research and education group. Now, if you are a sysadmin or in tech support and you know IPv4 like the back of your hand, but you're currently trying to support your organization's migration to IPv6, this explainer is made exactly for you. Our core premise for today is simple, but honestly, it's profound. To actually be effective at troubleshooting IPv6, you've got to completely unlearn your deeply ingrained IPv4 assumptions.
So, here's our roadmap. We are going to cover unlearning IPv4 muscle memory, the dual stack reality, addresses, neighbors, and gateways, the ICMPv6 and MTU trap, and we'll wrap it up with some golden rules for troubleshooting. Okay, let's dive into Section 1, Unlearning IPv4 Muscle Memory.
Look, before you can fix a broken IPv6 network, you really have to realize it operates under entirely different rules. It's not just a bigger address space, it's a fundamentally different protocol. To really grasp this, we need to bluntly contrast the old reality with the new one. In IPv4, we relied on broadcast traffic for practically everything, right? Well, in IPv6, broadcast is literally dead. Multicast has completely replaced it. That means those old troubleshooting tricks you love, like pinging the 255.255.255.255 broadcast address to see what's alive on the subnet, yeah, totally meaningless now. Plus, IPv4 networks rely heavily on NAT, or network address translation. But in IPv6, every single device is potentially globally routable. That changes your firewall design and your security assumptions from the ground up. And honestly, the weirdest shift for us veterans is how IP addresses are actually assigned to interfaces.
And this brilliantly illustrates the new normal. Think about your classic IPv4 interface. It usually just has its single, tidy little IP address. But the IPv6 reality, it's totally different. Having a stack of multiple addresses on a single interface is the correct intended behavior. It's not a glitch. You're going to routinely see a link local address, that's the one starting with FE80/10, right alongside one or more global unicast addresses and even temporary privacy addresses. They all just coexist at the same time. So if you see a link local address sitting next to global and privacy addresses, please don't try to fix it. Your system is working perfectly.
Moving right along to Section 2, the dual stack reality.
Pretty much all of us are managing dual-stack networks today, meaning IPv4 and IPv6 are running side by side. But the massive danger here is silent failure, and it's mostly due to a mechanism called happy eyeballs, which is defined in RFC 8305. Here is how it works under the hood. Modern web browsers strongly prefer IPv6, so when a user clicks a link, the browser fires off an IPv6 connection. But if it doesn't get a response immediately, it waits exactly 250 milliseconds, and then it fires off an IPv4 connection to race against it. The winner takes the traffic. What this means is, if your IPv6 path is broken, the user's browser just silently falls back to IPv4. The user still gets to the website, but every single connection they make suffers a 250 millisecond latency penalty. To the user, the internet just feels kind of sluggish today, but to you, that's an invisible IPv6 failure.
All right, let's look at Section 3, addresses, neighbors, and gateways.
If you are used to DHCP being the absolute, unquestioned boss of your network configuration, you're in for a real surprise. Let's talk about how devices make sure their IP address is unique using duplicate address detection, or DAD. When an interface boots up, the host sends out a neighbor solicitation for its tentative address to a multicast group. If another host on the network responds, bam, a conflict is detected. The interface address is immediately flagged as DAD failed, and it gets absolutely zero global connectivity. As a sysadmin, you really need to watch out for this. It happens a lot with cloned virtual machines that might end up with identical MAC addresses, which then generate the exact same IPv6 address. On Linux, you can easily spot this flag by just running the command ip-6 address show. Next is the huge shift away from DHCP-provided default gateways. Enter router advertisements, or RAs. In IPv6, your router is periodically shouting out, "Hey, I'm here," to the network. Hosts just listen to these RAs to establish their default route. There's no explicit gateway renewal process like a DHCP lease. The host simply relies on that periodic refresh. Interestingly, if a router sends out an RA with a lifetime of 0, it's explicitly telling the clients, "Hey, stop using me as a gateway right now." So if your hosts are silently dropping their routes, check those RAs. You can verify your default route on Linux using ip-6 route show default, or if you're on Windows, use NetShift interface IPv6 show route.
Oh, and by the way, you know the Address Resolution Protocol, ARP, that we all know and love? Yeah,
It's completely gone. It's been entirely replaced by the Neighbor Discovery Protocol, or NDP. Now, because NDP relies so heavily on multicast, your network switches absolutely must support MLD snooping. If they don't, they'll just flood NDP traffic to all ports and totally tank your performance. Also, the neighbor cache has very specific states now: reachable, stale, delay, probe, and failed. If you're troubleshooting and need to force a refresh, you need the new commands. For Linux, you're typing ip6 nay flush dev eth0, and on Cisco gear, it's clear IPv6 neighbors.
Let's move to Section 4, the ICMP v6 and MTU trap.
Okay, we've arrived at the most notorious IPv6 troublemaker of them all, the Path MTU Discovery, or PMTUD, failure loop. This is the one that drives sysadmins absolutely crazy because the symptoms defy all IPv4 logic. See, in IPv6, routers do not fragment packets, period. If a source sends a giant packet, and some router along the path hits a link with a smaller MTU, the router just drops the packet. It then generates an ICMP-v6 packet too big message and sends it back to the source, basically saying, hey, send smaller packets. But what if an overzealous firewall administrator has decided to block all ICMP-v6 traffic? Well, that critical packet too big message never makes it back to the source. So the sender keeps blasting large packets, the router keeps dropping them, and your traffic literally falls into a black hole.
So, the crucial point is knowing how to spot this. Here is exactly what this failure looks like in the wild. An end user complains, so you run a basic ping. Small packets succeed perfectly. Great. But the moment they try a large data transfer, like firing up an SSH session, loading an HTTPS website, or copying a file, the connection just hangs dead right after the TCP handshake. To diagnose this, you run a confirmation test. You send a ping with a large payload. Use ping 6-S1400 followed by the destination IP. If your normal tiny ping works, but that 1400 byte ping fails, boom, you've just confirmed a PMTUD black hole.
To actually prevent this nightmare, firewall administrators really need to understand that ICMP-v6 is not optional. It is the fundamental glue that holds the entire protocol together. So here's your cheat sheet of what you absolutely must permit. Type 1 for destination unreachable, type 3 for time exceeded, and types 133 through 137, which handle all the necessary neighbor discovery protocol operations. But most importantly, to fix that PMTUD black hole we just talked about, you have got to explicitly permit type 2, packet too big, inbound on every single firewall in your path.
Aside from MTU headaches, keep your eyes peeled for a few hidden traps that cause silent drops. First up, a lot of middle boxes, like firewalls and load balancers, will just silently drop IPv6 packets if they contain unknown extension headers. If you've got a mystery failure, break out Wireshark and inspect those headers. Second, if you ever stumble across legacy 6-4 tunnels using the 192.88.99.1 Anycast address, just know they were completely deprecated in RFC 7526 because they are notoriously unreliable. Avoid them like the plague. And finally, be aware of atomic fragments. These are packets with a fragment header, but no actual fragmentation. Modern firewalls often view them as a security risk and drop them on site.
And that brings us to Section 5, Golden Rules for Troubleshooting.
Let's pull everything we've covered today into a rapid-fire survival guide. Here are your 4 definitive golden rules of IPv6 troubleshooting. Rule number 1, never ever block ICMPv6 entirely. Types 1, 2, 3, and 133 through 137 must be allowed through. Rule number 2, multiple IP addresses on a single interface are totally normal. Please stop trying to fix that link local FE80 address. It is supposed to be there. Rule number 3, document your prefix delegations. If your ISP quietly changes your prefix, all your static configurations are going to fail silently. And rule number 4, always remember that a dual stack failure is completely invisible to you if you just test with a web browser. You've got to test the stacks explicitly and independently. Use tools like curl6 and curl4 so you can actually isolate which protocol is the one failing.
Which brings us to a really uncomfortable question, one you probably need to ask yourself today. Is your firewall silently breaking your IPv6 rollout right now, just because of inherited IPv4 habits? Take the time to audit those ICMPv6 rules, check your MTU paths, and seriously, unlearn the muscle memory that's holding you back. Thank you so much for joining me for this explainer of Part 5 of the tutorial. I'll catch you next time as we continue to decode the technologies shaping our networks.